Welcome to Sputnik, orbiting the world with me, George Galloway, flying solo for 1 week only. Welcome back to Sputnik. As the name of this show suggests, I have long had my eyes fixed on the heavens, ever since Yuri Gagarin became the first man in space. As Shakespeare said, there are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in our philosophy. Gigantic advances in technology have opened up the heavens to human observation at a rate undreamt of when the Sputnik became the first satellite. But I'm just an enthusiastic amateur. My next guest is a distinguished expert. Her name is Jane Green, and she is a fellow of the Royal Astronomical Society, writer, presenter, and broadcaster, and even a horse racing judge. So any photo finishes, any steward's inquiries that have discomfited you, she's partly responsible. Jane, we'll come, if we have time, onto the horse racing game, which is a fascinating double handle. But let's start with the truly astronomical.
Yes.
It is obvious that humans have looked up at the stars as long as there have been humans.
Yes.
And no doubt begun to wonder what was up there. But we're now answering these questions at such a rate.
We are.
And if we keep up this pace, by the time my youngest children are my age, we might even be on some of these planets we're now just probing. And we may know the secret of life, the secret of the universe. That must make that's an awesome job that you've got. Both of them are, actually.
It is,
Tell us about it.
Yes, it is. It is. In fact, George, every time I step up to the lectern to give a presentation, and I specialise in perspectives, so I love sharing about just how tiny our planet is, how small the solar system is. The galaxy itself seems immense, but in perspective is very, very tiny, one of just over at least 2 trillion other galaxies. And when I share that immensity with newcomers in the audience, it still has that capacity to blow my mind. And I think it always will. Because as you say, we look up, we wonder. I personally didn't look up young enough. I wish I'd started when I was a little girl. I would have been that much further ahead. I came to it a little bit later in life, and I regretted those lost years. But now, when I look up, I look beyond those blue skies, I look beyond our galaxy, I look out there, and as we were saying earlier, I wonder where it goes, where does it stop, and is there a beyond? And it still has that capacity to blow my mind.
Well, you just blown mine with that introduction. Let's get this in perspective then.
Yes.
We are a grain of sand, each of us, one of 7.5 billion, on this very tiny planet, which is part of a very small solar system,
Yes.
which is part of a very small galaxy,
Yes.
and there's 1 trillion galaxies.
Yeah,
Work that one out.
I know, but our galaxy itself, even though we say quite blithely that it's quite small, I mean, it's over 120,000 light years wide. And if light can cover about 6 trillion miles in a year, it's 120,000 years still to get from one side of the galaxy to the other. If you could travel at that speed, so covering 6 trillion miles in 1 year, you're going to need to be around for over 120,000 years to get to the other side of our galaxy. And it's just one tiny, weeny galaxy.
Speechless almost. The discoveries, or where they're not discoveries, they are a deep intensification of knowledge about places like Mars, for example.
Yes.
What's next? Let's assume, God willing, we have but another 30 years of life left. What is it realistic to expect we'll know within 30 years?
Oh, so much more exponentially. We're talking of going back to the moon. We are going to put men, women on Mars. So we're going to be up close and personal with Mars, possibly within our lifetimes. Is there life on Mars? Will there? There could well be. We've just discovered a 12-mile wide lake at the South Polar Cap.
Water being a precondition for life, we assume? We assume.
We think that, I mean, it's a little bit cold down there, but we don't know in the interior of Mars whether it's a little bit warmer. I mean, NASA's sending an InSight probe now to go and take the measurements on Mars. So if it is a little bit warmer down there, there may well be a place for life. Microbes can survive for millions millions to billions of years in certain environments. So we don't know yet, but we are going to find out. And I feel sure that it's not that long where we will be discovering other microbes on other planets. Because, of course, they're not just the planets traveling around our star. There are all those planets traveling around stars beyond our solar system, what we call the exoplanets. We have no idea, we're getting a very good idea, but we have no idea how many planets there can be around all these stars. There can be so many planets, and each of those planets can have some form of life, perhaps not carbon-based, perhaps not even water-based, but it could be life on some other form, in some other form. And anywhere, any of those planets could support life.
It isn't plausible, is it? I mean, as a matter of logic, it isn't plausible that only this little planet, in this solar system, this galaxy, in 1 trillion galaxies, it's not plausible that life only exists here.
No, when you consider the stats alone, George, I think the stats in themselves stack up. That with those odds, how can it be that our tiny pale blue dot, as Carl Sagan said, how can that tiny dot be the only place in the observable universe, so the universe that we've observed so far? How can that be the only place that supports life?
Is it possible, and I'm thinking of Mars, that there was once life on Mars, but now no longer is? Highly developed life, perhaps. Perhaps they ruined their planet, Mars, in the way that many people would say, we're ruining ours.
Indeed, and that's a very deep thought, and a possible thought too. There are some people that believe that that may well have been the case, because a few billion years ago, Mars was much hotter, it was much wetter. We haven't found evidence of existence there, but who knows? There could well have been. That is so long ago. We are here in such a brief time. Cosmologically speaking, it's not even the blink of an eye. So how can we possibly know outside our brief tenure of this tiny little dot? There's bound to be so much more that we don't know. We're trying to find out, but I'm sure there's much, much more that we
Okay, we've done Mars. In that 30-year hypothesis I've advanced, you say we're going back to the moon. Why, by the way, have we never gone back to the moon?
Good question. I don't know. I think it's because we thought we'd done the moon. We'd discovered pretty much all there was to know about the moon. It was seen to be a pretty large lump of rock and perhaps not that much else. We want to get on to the more exciting things where there could possibly be life. We know there's no life on the moon. So it's probably that desire to discover more life that is driving it. But within that 30 years, to me, the moon and the Mars, our solar system indeed, which we have done a reconnaissance within, we are going much, much further out. And I think in that time frame, George, with the advent of more powerful telescopes, the James Webb telescope, God willing that it does launch in 2022, that's going to be seeing much, much further out, much, much further to the beginning of time, beyond the Hubble Space Telescope. So what more will we be seeing with a more powerful telescope? And the telescopes on the planet itself, the ground-based ones, they are all becoming increasingly powerful. The adaptive optics, which allow us to see more steadily, further out, the technology with those is increasing exponentially. We're seeing much, much more than the Hubble Space Telescope now sees with ground-based telescopes already. So
is it going to be mainly telescope? Because of course there are severe limitations, because man, woman lives 70, hopefully 80 and a little bit more. The amount of time in human life terms that it takes to travel is a severe limitation to what we can actually go and touch, isn't it?
Definitely it is. It is. But we are laying the foundation for those that will come behind us. And with young people coming through and with the increasing technology commensurate with that, we are going to
slow people's lives down, for example, to make possible very long space travel.
Wouldn't that be lovely? Yes, cryogenics. That is something that NASA actually are researching, that we can actually go into a cryogenic state. They effectively put us to sleep for a journey to Mars and beyond, so that we don't need the fuel, we don't need to be having the water, we don't need the food, therefore we can have a lighter rocket, we can go faster. Yeah, they are doing research on that. So yes, who knows?
Now, it's a photo finish. You're the judge in the steward's room. You're conducting a steward's inquiry. How do you go from from this, from that, from the stars, to a short head victory for this horse rather than another?
I'm often asked that. Indeed, when I first started working for the British Horse Racing Authority, we had a very brief discussion around a lunch at Royal Ascot. It was a Royal Ascot meeting. All the officials were gathered around a big table, and the discussion just happened to lead on to the sun. And I asked, well, do you actually know where the sun is? Do you know how big it is? Do you know where it is? And there was like a stony silence. And then gradually I found I was the only person sitting on the table. But now, 15 years later, I've actually delivered lectures for various people within the British horse racing industry on astronomy, and found that the planetariums, the auditoriums have been full of people who are very immersed immersed in horse racing, but have become immersed in the night sky as well. And I find that people come and sit at my table now because they want to ask me questions.
I'd never be away from your table. Now, you kindly brought your optic here. Tell us why.
Because we're approaching the autumn equinox. So
of course.
Yeah, it's the official time where we're now coming into autumn, which officially is Sunday morning at something like 2 to 3 in the morning. And that happens, of course.
What's the significance of that?
Yeah, the significance of that is it really denotes that we are now coming into, well, we're heading towards winter. So the sun, although the sun is stationary at the centre of the solar system, as far as we see it, the sun appears to be going from the north to south of the celestial equator, which is the equator projected from the equator on Earth. So as far as we see it, the sun is now going to dip south. And as we travel in our orbit around the sun, if the sun was here, we are now tilting away from the sun. So we're heading into winter.
Into darker nights.
Into darker nights, into shorter nights as well.
But hopefully some nice moons. You've got the harvest moon too.
Indeed. Yeah, the harvest moon's going to hit us really nicely because, as you know, a harvest moon, George, is when there's a full moon. Because if the sun is here and the moon is here, you cannot see it. But currently the moon is steaming round to its full moon position, so the sun is shining full on the moon, and it's at a particular angle, and we're at a particular place in our orbit around the sun, that you will be able to see the harvest moon rising earlier each night for a few nights. And also it will be a beautiful colour because the angle of the light will be passing through our atmosphere. It's all to do with the angles. So it should be a nice deep red colour. It will look bigger, but of course it's not. It would be a little like holding an aspirin. If you hold an aspirin to the horizon and then rise up to the sky, the aspirin stays the same size, but it looks a lot bigger when it's nearer the horizon. It's called the moon illusion, and the same thing applies to the moon. So it will look much, much bigger on the horizon because of the angle, but obviously it's the same size, and it will look beautiful because it will be a lovely deep red colour.
Beautiful is the most important word in all of that, because we mustn't lose sight of the fact that our Earth is beautiful, as are the heavens.
Indeed.
You are the most interesting guest I have ever had.
Oh, well, thank you, George.
Jane Green, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
No social media today, as I don't have Gayatri to tell me what's rattling. But you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram, RT_Sputnik, and on Facebook, Sputnik on Russia Today. I've been George Galloway, and it's been marvellous.